Hi there. One of the things that I've been noticing as I've been watching a lot of media over the last few months is the way that all of the Australian politicians have been quick to encourage people on their response. Listening to our local Premier Gladys, it's almost been over the top in the way that she has been encouraging and affirming the way that people have been responding to the government directives. And it sort of sounded so different because encouragement isn't something that we often give. We are often very critical. Often the things that are on the media are the problems with society rather than its strengths. And so particularly out of the mouths of politicians who are often on the defensive, having to respond, it's been remarkably different, this level of encouragement. And as we're at our sixth letter in this part of Revelation, chapters 2 and 3, this vision that John has as the risen Jesus confronts him with a message, we see that for the church in Philadelphia, there is a message of encouragement. Now, Philadelphia is about 30 miles southeast of Sardis, which was the church that we heard about last week. And it's on the way to the final destination, Laodicea, that we read about in the end of chapter 3. And so Philadelphia, in the ancient Asia Minor area, was a place that had both politically and commercial advantages. Because of its location, it was sort of a real port. And lots of people, goods, and therefore information was passing through Philadelphia. Naturally, there were sort of volcanoes in the area. In fact, it's reported that the same volcano that had caused some devastation for nearby Sardis had also impacted the city of Philadelphia in the first century. But this ground was fertile for producing particularly vines, and so there's a sense that it was a really agriculturally bound city. There was a strong sense of planting, seeing things grow, having them harvested, having a season for rest and then repeat, as well as having visitors from all across the empire. There was a whole range of ideas, and there's a fair amount of influence that was caught up in this particular city. But it seems that from historical documents that at the time that John's received this message that needed to be passed on, so around 95 AD, Philadelphia was still in a rebuilding phase. A major earthquake, as I mentioned earlier in the century, had sort of meant that they'd had to put their hand out really to the Roman Empire. Much like today, where those whose industry or jobs have been affected have had to put their hand out to the government to receive funding. This whole city needed the resources and the support of the Roman Empire to rebuild itself. So in a sense, it became more aligned to the ways of the empire and allegiance, somewhat spiritually, to the emperor as some sort of divine being, as well as sort of this historical idea that there's something spiritual in the ground, that the natural world in its cycle of birth, growth and death speaks something about how we should view life. And so it's sort of in this melting pot of different allegiances that there is a group of people who have heard about Jesus and are wanting to trust in him. Now, there's nothing really written in the Bible that gives us information about when the church was established. It's not mentioned in the book of Acts, but with this locality, it certainly seems that it would have been on one of Paul's missionary journeys. And we see in some documents that are available from the 2nd century that a sort of fairly well-structured church did exist within this city. And so it's to this church that Jesus has a message. And the message we see from Revelation chapter 3 verse 7 starts with this. To the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, these are the words of him who is holy and true, who holds the key of David. What he opens, no one can shut, and what he shuts, no one can open. as with all these messages, Jesus gives identifying marker, and today we see him give this assertion that he is the Holy One, he is the true one, he is the real deal. God had promised that he would establish a forever kingdom with a king who wouldn't be flawed like David, but would be the chosen Messiah, the all-reigning king. And Jesus is saying, this is me. And he's the one who's been set apart by God. He's the one who's demonstrated a life that was in perfect obedience to the will of the Father. And Jesus is the one who's going to redefine history. And so he's reminding the church in Philadelphia that it's his opinion that matters. And so he gives us the image of being the one who holds the keys for the location that will last. And so I guess this idea of being a resident and where you belong, having access and permission, being able to be accepted and welcomed as opposed to being booted out, is the image that Jesus is wanting to pick up. And that's because it seems that for the church in Philadelphia, they've had a recent experience of being booted out. The Jewish folk in the town no longer welcome them in the synagogue. And so Jesus is encouraging that he's the one who can open the door, and he's the one who also shuts the door. And the door that he is opening is the door to a place that lasts. And so verse 7, I know your deeds. See, I have placed before you an open door that no one can shut. I know that you have little strength, yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. Now again, we hear these familiar words of Jesus knowing. He sees all things, he knows all things. He's the one who brings a true evaluation on life. And what he sees in the church in Philadelphia is signs that he is greatly encouraged by. It's one of the only 2 churches out of these 7 that Jesus has a message for where there's no rebuke. It's a real word of encouragement from the risen Jesus. And so what we see here is that what encourages Jesus is not their influence, as opposed to what we saw last week, where Sardis had a strong reputation within its city, but there was nothing that Jesus commended about them. Jesus recognizes that outwardly the church in Philadelphia has little strength. Perhaps that meant they were small in number, perhaps that meant that they were very low in influence, but Jesus is saying that despite your outward appearance, I am greatly encouraged. And he commends them because they've kept the word that they've received and they haven't denied his name. This is a sense that they've been willing to guard their community against error, against false teaching, which we've seen run rampant in the various churches in the wider area. And they've also been able to hold firm in the face of opposition. And no doubt the scenario probably would have played out that the Jewish community would have said, well, look, if you just give up this claim that Jesus is the Messiah, if you just align with us and sort of say, well, look, he's a prophet from God, he's a good guy who spoke some important messages, then you can stay. But they were unwilling to compromise on that truth, to stand up in the face of opposition. And Jesus says, great job, guys. He is greatly encouraged. And so there's a helpful reminder here that outward isn't everything. And I think anyone who has shares in the stock market, or a lot of smoke and mirrors. CEOs' jobs are about trying to report what's happening within a company, but also to present it to the market in the best possible light. And so I guess the regulators sort of enforce this reporting so that things can't be hidden too much. But anyone who's got some financial background knows that there's an art in being able to move the numbers around in the reports to present an update that has all the sort of positive ringtones that people want to hear. And so is the danger for churches, that we can get caught up in our outward appearance, about how impressive our particular programs are, or the aesthetic of our building, or the website, or design sort of stuff. This can be all a cover-up for actually a lack of health. And Jesus says here that what is important is holding to his word and not denying his name. And going on, verse 9, I will make those who are of the synagogue of Satan, who claim to be Jews though they are not, but are liars, I will make them come and fall down at your feet and acknowledge that I have loved you. You see, as Jesus opens the door with an encouragement to his people because they've held firm to the word, that they haven't denied his name, so too he will close the door on those who oppose him. And so there's a sense here that those who have been perpetuating lies about Jesus' true identity will eventually see the truth. They will see things as they are. And this church in Philadelphia, these Christians who have been probably joked upon and kicked out of a whole range of different social settings, they will be vindicated because Jesus will be made known and no one will be able to deny his existence. No one will be able to refute his authority. And so the great promise here is that those who trust in him will eventually be vindicated. 10. Since you have kept my command to endure patiently, I will also keep you from the hour of trial that is going to come on the whole world to test the inhabitants of the earth. Another encouragement here is that those who have been able to hold on to Jesus' word, that they've kept his commands, who are willing to endure patiently as they seek to honour Jesus in the way that they live and respond, as they try and apply the word that they're holding to the various situations that they're facing in life. Jesus offers protection. Now, this is starting to sort of touch on some of the areas in Revelation where within the Christian tradition there's much debate about what is actually being mentioned here. And these first few chapters in the book of Revelation are reasonably uncontroversial, and as the book continues on, there's more controversy and different opinions within the Christian faith. But maybe it's helpful for us to just sort of stop and think a little bit about the book at large. So this is a little bit of a sidebar about some of the issues in the book of Revelation at large, because they do relate to verse 10. So there's 4 different ways typically of reading the book of Revelation. The first one is a sense that this is written just for the immediate context in the first century. There's a futuristic way of reading it that says that this is written completely about a time in the future. Now there's a historist perspective that says that the message in Revelation was written in place and time for a particular group of people, but the message and the truths of it are consistent across all time for all people. And then there's an idealist perspective that says that none of the information in Revelation is about any particular place and time, but they're all just concepts that we should try and apply in whatever setting we find ourselves. So the way that I've been reading the book of Revelation would classify more here as a historist view of things, that things did happen in place and time, but the application, the principles of them should be thought and integrated to various times in history. Now, one of the key aspects in the book of Revelation is this idea of the millennium, and as we read parts of Revelation, like chapter 3, verse 10, our understanding of how God is going to bring about the unfolding of his judgment and the future comes into some different categories. So the first view is this idea of a pre-millennial, where Jesus' first coming at his resurrection will then be followed by his next coming, which we're all still awaiting on, and at that point there'll be 1,000 years of an earthly reign and then the final judgment. Post-millennial view says that the 1,000-year earthly reign comes somewhere now before Jesus' second coming. So there's always sort of a view to saying, are we in the 1,000 years? Has it started yet? And then the final judgment. Or an amillennial view, which is that Jesus' first coming then is followed by his heavenly present reign, which then will culminate in his second coming and then the final judgment. Now, for me, I've sort of got an amillennial view of reading the book of Revelation. Happy to chat about that at another point. But as we come to chapter 3, verse 10 and others, and as we have discussions about some of the other imagery captured in the book of Revelation, it's helpful just to think that how you view the millennial will affect how you read particular passages on it. And we don't need to particularly fight about things. It's good to have good, robust discussion about why we view things the way that we do. But it's helpful perhaps just to start off that they are the categories to think about. So thinking about chapter 3, verse 10, I'll also keep you from the hour of trial that is going to come on the whole world to test the inhabitants of the earth. I would take that as being the trial when Jesus returns for his second coming and brings the final judgment. So as opposed to the warning earlier in Revelation 2 that Jesus would only allow the persecution or the trial to last for 10 days for that particular church, I think this is the eternal judgment where all will be held to account before their Maker about how they've lived. And so Jesus is offering protection for those who have held to his word, have not denied his name, as they face the final judgment which all of humanity will face at the same time. And so flowing into verse 11, the encouragement then is, I am coming soon. So hold on to what you have so that no one will take your crown. And so again, this affirmation, we sort of keep hearing it. Jesus is wanting to remind his church that he is coming. Now, this is an important message because it's going to affect the way that they live their life. We've got family here this weekend. Preparation for this weekend is different. And so, as we think about Jesus' return, well, who is he? Well, he's the chosen king. When is he coming? Anytime soon. And why is he coming? To bring about a reconciliation of all things. He's going to come and to take his people and to deliver final judgment on the world. And so this is to be embedded in the life of the community. And so it's a bit like how the premiers have been encouraging us as citizens about how well we've been doing with their guidelines, but then they are always keen to affirm that we need to keep doing it. You know, so Gladys this week was encouraging people to ask the person at the cafe, you know, have you wiped down those salt and pepper shakers after the last person touched them? And there's a sense of being on high alert. And so too, Jesus is wanting his church to be on high alert. So this little church in Philadelphia that seemed to have little strength, but who brought about great encouragement from Jesus, also needs to continue to remember that Jesus is coming. And it's this future that should dictate their present. Verse 12, the one who is victorious, I will make a pillar in the temple of my God. Never again will they leave it. I'll write on them the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which is coming down out of heaven from my God, and I will also write on them my new name. Whoever has ears, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Jesus is wanting to give them confidence about what he is doing in them. And what he's doing them is making them into something. He's making them a pillar. It's this picture of security. And what he's going to give them is this new name. And so it's helpful here that this church, that outwardly may have looked the most weak, the least impressive, is a church that God is going to greatly reward. He's going to give them more than enough. He's going to make them into something that will ultimately last. You see, what Jesus is really offering to humanity is ultimate security. And so being with him provides security. And there's a sense that that's really what we want, isn't it? We want security. So much of our life is consumed by trying to build security. That's why the stock market is so tantalizing. We can see our net worth increase. We can have confidence that we have reserves to pull on in days when we might face uncertainty or hardship. We want to believe what the CEOs are saying so that we can see that the thing that we have invested in will actually bring about a return. But for anyone who's been in the stock market long enough, you know that sometimes even the thing that looks red hot can often be nothing. But Jesus here is reminding his church that he is everything. He is the one true God. He is the Holy One. He's been set apart by the Father to be the ultimate source of security and life. And he is going to make his people a pillar in the temple of God, of what God is building, an eternal residence. And in that comes this change of name. And so this word of encouragement from the holy and true Jesus, the one who has the keys to life that will last forever, is an encouragement that for this church, that despite their outward appearances that in many ways were unimpressive and some levels weak, could hold to. And just as they held on to God's word in the past, just as they refused to deny his name against their opponents, Jesus wants to encourage them to continue to seek and privilege the one who guides them, the one who is building them into a people who will last, who is joining them to himself, to be in rich relationship, to have ultimate security. And so this message from the one who is holy and true, the risen Jesus, to the church in Philadelphia is a message of encouragement. It's a message of encouragement because they have held on to the word, they have not denied his name. And so the encouragement for us is that example, to hold on to God's word, to refuse to deny his name. Friends, we live in a society where everyone is living out their worldview. Everyone's trying to navigate life. Some people would identify of being a religious background, a cultural background, or atheist, or whatever, but all of us are seeking to navigate life by applying our beliefs to our situation. Jesus' encouragement is to hold true to his word as we seek to navigate life, to not deny his name, because ultimately he will be revealed. He is going to return. He is coming. And those who hold to him will be vindicated. And they are being made to last. Those who hold to Jesus are given the most holy name as one of his people. And that's the kind of security that actually lasts. So friends, we need to be aware of where we're looking to find security in the things that are near to us, in the things that other people who deny Jesus are wanting to find their security in the midst of this fragile and uncertain world. Because ultimately, friends, although many markets are trying to sell us security, trying to put spin on messages that convince us that we need what they're offering, Jesus is the only holy one. He's the only one who's been set apart by God, and he is actually the true one who will bring something that lasts.